The final song is one of the oddest experiences I've had in gaming. It is the final boss of Drakengard 3, a character action game from the demented mind of this perverse creature. Yes, spoilers, don't worry, you weren't gonna play it anyway, but I'm not actually gonna delve that much into the story. In fact, the only establishing information you really need is that this game involves 6 powerful witches, I guess, and that it includes a good deal of meta-humor. Also dragons. I'll go into more of the game at the very end, but for now, that's all we need. Now, typically, to analyze a boss, it must be done in the context of the game. The mechanics must be explored before you can talk about how they're being tested, exploited, or used to make a point. I don't have to do that here. You could attach the final song to Nintendogs, and mechanically it would feel as at home as it does here. This fight is a work of art.
Well, this dog is a girl. A boy.
It is a beautiful, mesmerizing, and puzzling piece, but ultimately, it is a joke being told at the player's expense. If you, Souls veteran, DMC enthusiast, and Kingdom Hearts Remind enjoyer told me this was the hardest boss you'd ever encountered, I wouldn't question it. To put it simply, this boss is mean. It is really mean. And I don't mean hard, I mean genuinely hostile towards the player. And while that may seem an odd thing to try and achieve, I'm gonna talk about how the devs pulled it off and why I think it's worth talking about. So, without any further ado, allow me to set the stage. You've put 30 odd hours into this action game. You've fought through hordes of enemies, unlocked powerful weapons, bested bosses, and made your way through multiple endings. And now, you're here. The last level. The true ending is just in reach, and this boss makes an impression immediately. This is a brand new control scheme, a new mode of gameplay. There is zero tutorialization, you have no freaking clue what you're supposed to do, and you quickly learn that a single mistake spells death. From looking at the footage, it may seem obvious, but it feels different when you're in the moment, I assure you. You have yet to gain your bearings, and already you're in an all or nothing situation. You're going to mess up. I haven't played Drakengard 1, but I know it presents a similar scenario as the final boss. You're supposed to send a ring out to negate the boss's ring, but that approach here will get you killed. For the average player, this is a middle finger, and to the returning player, it's arguably an even bigger one because it directly subverts your expectations. Upon the first of your many deaths, you are treated to the punishment this boss has in store for you: suspense and boredom. You only get one opportunity per about a minute to attempt to learn what you're supposed to do. Meanwhile, you need to watch this intro before each try. And since you're liable to die immediately the first few tries, you're probably already sick of it before you even begin the fight in earnest. From the first impression alone, you're given the most valuable information to have about this encounter. This boss does not respect you. Moreover, it does not respect your time. This is the crux of the challenge in this fight. Contending with the fact that you will be spending a lot more time than you know you should on it because of the many ways this boss will disrespect you, and going through the emotional and mental turmoil of the waiting process. You'll see how this idea develops throughout. So, you finally figured out the controls and what to do. Every face and shoulder button does the same thing, and you have to press whichever one you want when the ring collides with you. Yes, this is a rhythm game. Once you understand what you're supposed to do, you realize, it's not that bad. The boss sends out rings in time with the music. It will take a measure to send them out, and you respond in the next measure like so. The music is in 4/4, thank God, so each measure is as clearly defined and intuitive to read as you could want. The tempo is andante, which is Italian for mid AF, so it's very easy to keep up with. And finally, the rhythms this boss sends out aren't very complex or hard to read. A lot come on the downbeat, and none will have you tapping particularly quickly. As far as rhythm games go, this is as easy as it gets. However, you will die if you miss a single beat. The expectation is low, but the stakes are high. Before we move on, let's talk about the fact that this rhythm game is here at all. This is another example of the boss disrespecting you. Yes, you spent 30 hours learning the mechanics of this game, earning the strongest weapons, blah blah, whatever. None of that matters. You're playing this game now. This is blatantly unfair. If you've got some sense of rhythm, you're at an advantage. If not, you're at a disadvantage, and this distinction is completely arbitrary. There have been no rhythmic elements to this game at all thus far, nothing to give you the impression that the mechanics inherently favor the rhythmically talented, yet here you are at the end, and the way is being blocked by something you couldn't have prepared for. And that's to say nothing of deaf people, which is fine because they can't hear me anyway. I don't think the game is necessarily wrong for doing this. The thesis of this boss is lol fuck you, and this choice certainly works to achieve that, but the devs have chosen to definitively alienate some of its would-be fans to do this, and any negative feedback as a result is completely warranted. But let's get back to the fight. So here you are, flying around, listening to this beautiful music, seriously, Keiichi Okabe is a god, watching this odd interpretive dance and hitting the clearly telegraphed beats in response to the boss. It's not hard, it's quite peaceful, and you might be lulled into a sense of security. This serenity lasts for about a minute until... the tempo rises and the next section starts. Still, it's not that bad. The song hasn't gotten that much faster, and the rhythms being sent out are still quite simple, but you just felt your stomach drop because of what this development implies. Remember, I said this game features 6 witches. Now that you've seen the second appear, and you notice the flower has 4 empty petals, you finally get an idea of what this ordeal is going to entail. This is going to be a 6-phase boss fight. Is Drakengard the Dark Souls of Nier? And you're not even halfway. The fear will start setting in, but nevertheless you push on, and eventually something will happen. The camera will zoom out and take on a bird's eye view. Since you'll likely be focused on the rings, you may not even really clock what's happening at first, but yeah, it stayed static during the first phase, keeping your character at the center of the screen, but the camera moves now, and you may find your character a little hard to see. Not really a big deal, everything you need is being clearly represented, and shortly after, the phase ends, and again the tempo rises as you enter phase 3. Something to note is that the first ring of every phase is on the downbeat. This is to help you acclimate to the new tempo. It would be really easy to mess up if a phase began with a ring on the second or fourth beat of the measure. How considerate. Now, it doesn't take long for this phase to get a little screwy. You'll notice the camera is far more active than before. Whereas the last phase introduced a slow, consistent zoom out, here you'll see it bob up and down. Each measure you're dealing with a different perspective. You'll go from seeing the rings from above to seeing them from below. It can be a little disorienting in of itself, but what's worse is when the camera faces the rings directly. You can't actually see the rings approaching you. You can only guesstimate their proximity based on their size. I keep saying this, but it's not that bad. If anything, it's a positive. The screen is more visually interesting, right? Anyway, you've made it halfway. Congratulations! We got to phase 4. And this is where you're going to die. For the most part, it's your standard fare. The tempo increases yet again, and you keep going as you have been. In fact, the camera is playing a lot nicer than it did before. It isn't making as erratic movements, it's just slowly panning down. But it keeps slowly panning down until, once again, you are eye level with the boss, and it sends 4 rings at you. 4 rings is actually one of the best measures you could hope for. You just have to tap to the beat. However, thanks to the camera, these rings completely fill the screen as you tap away. And once they're gone, where am I? What is... Wait! The camera zooms in past your character, and you can no longer rely on your visuals to time your beats correctly. Since this is a rhythm game with one button, you technically don't need visuals. Nonetheless, you've been absorbing them. Whether or not you've been relying on them doesn't matter. They've been a part of the equation this whole time, and this subversion is likely to throw you off regardless. You'll see the ring approaching the part of the screen where your character usually is, and you will press a button too early. It's a nice touch that this zoom happens while the screen is consumed by flashing lights. I don't think this trick would be nearly as effective if you saw the zoom occur. You could mentally prepare. Instead, your character is suddenly gone and you have to act while you're computing what just happened. It's great. Just great. I'm going to take a break here to remind you all of something. We've been merrily going through this fight as I hold your hand, and going through it in one go like this, well, it's not that bad. And you're right, it isn't. So do it again. This is when the boss fight really starts. You have to do all that again for 3.5 minutes before you get back to where you were. And remember, no mistakes. Going through the fight now hits different. You know that the boss is going to pull a cheap shot. You know that it killed you, and you have to wait in anticipation for that moment playing this basic ass rhythm game. The nerves will start to build, and you're more liable to mess up where you wouldn't have before, but that's nothing compared to when you get to the part that killed you. The suspense can easily get to you and cause you to mistime your clicks. Either you're too eager or too... Personally, I found my progress in this boss quite linear. In every attempt, I'd get further than I did the previous time, or die in the same spot. This is when I first started dying in the same spot. I died 4 or 5 times before I got the hang of dealing with your character going off screen. That means I've played the first phases of this fight 9 times. This is getting close to half an hour. You realize I'm sat here, controller in one hand, eyes glazed over, pressing a single button to an easy rhythm game I just played. You realize that this boss demands your full attention, right? It's not demanding, but you can't listen to a podcast, you can't watch something on the side, you can't check your phone, you can't risk dying. You just have to play the same game of Simon Says over and over, waiting for the moment where Simon pulls a gun on you and tells you to duck. I didn't say Simon Says! Nonetheless, you power through for quite literally no good reason, and you get back to where you were. You'll notice that while the camera's moving, the boss will send out very basic rhythms on the downbeat to offset the disorientation. That's quite nice. Once the camera comes to a stop though, the rhythms get a little trickier, asking you to respond on the upbeat instead. However, once you get that first note, you might notice the ring disappearing in the distance. Yeah, although you aren't on screen, you can still approximate when you're supposed to hit the notes based solely on this, so in some sense, you do have visual feedback, and that might be enough to... On to phase 5. The tempo is significantly faster than when we started now. It used to be andante, but now you could describe it as allegro, or yeah, this is pretty fucking fast now. Not only that, but the rhythms have finally gotten more complex. Up until this point, all the rings were quarter notes. They would all come on the beats of the measure. Now we get eighth notes mixed in. This is the first phase I could see people getting stuck on because of the rhythms alone. In the context of rhythm games as a whole, it's still nothing crazy, but I should remind you that this isn't a rhythm game! The camera plays nice here for the most part, until the end when we're tossed into this fresh hell. As the boss is sending out its most complex rhythms yet, the camera pulls away to focus on you now. Well, aren't you handsome? The boss is no longer on screen. Again, you've lost visual feedback. You might think this is preferable to not seeing yourself. At least you can see the rings hit you. You can see when you're supposed to press the button, but no. The visuals do not give you enough time to react. You will see when you're supposed to hit the button, but if you're not already hitting it, it will be too late. Let's look at some of the rhythms this boss sends at you whilst the camera is fucking with you. A 1-2-4. This rhythm is designed to exploit your disadvantage. That fucking rest is there to hurt you. Remember, as soon as the fourth beat of the measure plays, you have to react, but you were probably listening to the last ring and may have forgotten how soon you were meant to hit the first because you can't see it! If you could see this coming, this wouldn't throw you off. This wouldn't be hard at all. But that's not the game we're playing. We're playing this. It's 4 minutes later, and you're back here. What's the next rhythm? The most complex rhythm in the fight so far. The fastest you've been called to tap the button, and no visual feedback. Disrespect. This is about the part where you might go, I'm starting to sense a little hostility here. The pattern has been established. The camera is going to play very dirty and you are just going to have to cope and seethe about it, okay? Fuck! We did it. The final phase. The tempo is al dente, or kinda raw. We start off with a 4 to the floor to get you acclimated and immediately get weird with some eighth notes. This will continue. We're getting a lot more notes on the offbeat now, and of course, the camera starts pulling towards you again. No, it's pulling towards the button. No, it's... Really? Stop it! Now, you might start laughing. I know the bullshit should have been smelt as soon as the camera started messing with you, but part of you held out hope. There was plausible deniability. This is an art piece. The camera angles are part of the presentation. It looked cool to zoom into the boss like that, right? It looked less cool when it zoomed on you, but you could see how someone could have maybe thought that could be cool. You could have been holding out hope until now that the puppet master pulling the strings, or holding the camera, has been acting in good faith. Misguidedly, but well-intended nonetheless. This puts those stupid notions to rest. You were in denial. Look at this. The cameraman is not concerned with getting interesting shots. He isn't focused on exploring the piece artistically. He's trying to shake away a wasp. He is having a seizure. No, to be perfectly honest with you, he is laughing his ass off watching you sweat. Oh, nothing interesting to see here. Let's just look at the fucking sky. That cloud looks like a loser! We've gotten to the point where each time I play that cutscene, it means 5 minutes have passed. You've been at this for too long for how hard this should be. Now, I have spent ages on particular boss fights. Smo and Ornstein, Virgil, over a day. Virgil, days. Yozora, weeks. I love a good challenging boss fight. I spent hours on end bashing my head against them, and when I won, I went back to spend hours more. Why? Because I was having fun. The gameplay is fun. This isn't fun anymore. To be more precise, in action games like those, or like this game apparently is, you have options. You have a variety of offensive and movement options, a variety of evasive and defensive options, a variety of strategies, different modes of approach. With each attempt, you can try something different, even if that difference is small. Hell, even if you try the exact same thing, that is a choice you're making. What character action players find satisfaction in is having a great deal of input over their character's actions. Here, you have no options. The fight is binary. Either you recite the words exactly as written, or you die trying. Since you are required to be perfect at all times to progress, there is no satisfaction to be had in replaying earlier segments. You already performed the best you possibly could. So going through them again and again and again, well, it can get a wee bit maddening if you ask me. Again, the inputs being asked of you are incredibly basic, but you still need to pay full attention to respond properly. You can't risk messing up. This format was specifically designed to make you suffer. I was in denial. I think you heard me enter anger for a bit. This is when I started bargaining. I started looking for options where there otherwise were none. Turn up the effects volume. Turn down the music volume. You know what? Mute the music. This isn't that bad. This actually helps. But that was a pretty cool song though. Okay, turn the music back on. What do I do? Now, if you've been paying attention, you may have already figured out the answer. All of these tricks have involved messing with your visual feedback to break your focus on the audio. How do you fight that? Simple. Close your eyes. Don't engage with the screen. The scary man can't hurt you now. Yes, this boss is broken for the deaf, but blesses the blind. Too bad they can't actually play the other 99% of the game. Maybe if they made a team. This is actually a solid strategy. The lesson that this boss is hammering into you is that rhythm is king. Nothing else matters. So yeah, focus on the rhythm. Keep your eyes closed. If you can commit to that decision. I couldn't. Personally, I got very stressed in the darkness. I would eventually peak and that would tend to screw me. I had also grown too dependent on the visual feedback. Although it couldn't be trusted to show you when to hit the rings, it showed you how far along you were in the fight. You could make visual landmarks and anticipate certain rhythms. Yes, you could do that off the audio alone, but I'd start doubting myself. Is this the second or the third phase? I know it shouldn't matter, I just need to respond to the audio, but the fact I had questions in my head at all would throw me off. I wanted to, but I legitimately got too stressed out. However, I think there's something clearly intended by the devs here to keep you from looking away. There's a reason this boss looks the way it does. It's interesting. It's beautiful. It's something you probably want to look at. The white girls are trying to dance. It's hilarious. Part of this experience is the visuals. So far, the most remarkable part of this experience is the visuals. So, while it is ass, I'm going to eat it. This is what the boss does to you. It makes you your own enemy. You're going through the stages of grief and I am depressed. It's not that I accept that I have no options. I'm just not gonna do anything about it. We're in the final phase. Let's just let it happen. So this phase 2 culminates with the hardest rhythm so far, 5 rings in the measure, the fastest we've had to tap, and as you know, the cameraman is hashtag Harlem Shaking or something funnier. This is easily where I died the most. Partly because I was trying out weird, different methods, but partly because this is just really disorienting, dude. But you start making your way through it. Perhaps inch by 5 minutes later, inch, but you see the light at the end of the tunnel. And before you know it, the tricks are done. You hit the last note. It's over. You know, in retrospect, this section of crazy disorienting movement really doesn't last that long. In fact, none of those screwy moments lasted that long, actually. They just felt longer because you didn't know when they would end. Now you do. And you know what? In the end, it wasn't that bad. What do you do? What do you... No. The white girls, they've synchronized their periods. I'm gonna cut that out. 7-phase boss fight. A Macarena. This is when the fight starts. Everything you've been through was just a prelude to this phase. You may have built a sense of confidence. I've been through all those other phases. I can make it through this one. They've been growing consistently shorter as the tempo rises. Surely this one can't last too long. Oh. Phase 6 lasted 25 seconds. Phase 7 is 2 minutes. You're going to have fun. The reason this phase lasts so long is because the tempo actually slows down here. We're back to where we started at a walking pace. The tempo can slow down as well. Maybe that's something to take note of. Anyway, it doesn't help that the tempo is slower. When she sends out a whole measure of eighth notes, you'll still be tapping faster than you've had to yet. And yes, she'll send out whole measures of eighth notes frequently. She's not going easy on you anymore. This phase is a victory lap, or I guess you died lap of all the bullshit you've been through. Every established trick in the book, she'll use them in the order you encountered them. Your only solace here is knowing that she's not going to pull anything out that you can't expect. You've seen this all before, right? Of course, you can't know that until you get there, so maybe that's not worth much. But if you clock that she's cycling through these tricks in order, you can anticipate. Anyway, let's go through. Start off with a zoom to a bird's eye view. Child's play. Next comes messing with your depth perception. Is this even a trick? Easy. Then we zoom into you, and all you're gonna do is send 2 eighth note couplets? What a waste. I could do this with my eyes closed. We know what's coming next. A zoom into us. And again, she squanders the opportunity to mess us up by only sending 2 quarter notes. Wait. No. Wait, what? 2 eighth note couplets again? I guess I can't do this with my eyes closed. No, not the cutscene! This is the one part of the fight I might have to call BS on. Listen to this. Did you hear that? That is a single beat, if I'm not mistaken. For whatever reason, the sound design is just wonky here. Even those that were able to commit to playing with their eyes closed are likely to get screwed. Was that the intent? Was that intended? I don't really know, and it doesn't even matter if your eyes are closed or not, you can't see anything anyway! The one solace you get is that once you die to it, you get a glimpse of your mistake. Oh, there were 2 rings. Fuck. Well, now you know for next time. Next time. 6 minutes from now. This is bullshit, right? So far, you've been taught that rhythm is king, and if you focus solely on that, you'll be fine. This implied that for how mean this boss could be, it was ultimately fair. You could plausibly do it in one try, but not this instance. But is that unfair? I've given this a lot of thought, and ultimately, I'm gonna have to say no. Here's an analogy I'd like to run past you. Say you're playing a platformer. There are no lives, you can retry as much as you'd like, and you reach a section where there's a pit hidden in the floor. You have no way to know it's there was no hint at any point to be wary of hidden pits, it comes completely out of left field, and you will die to it. Is that unfair? You might say, yes, the game didn't warn you at all, but you can try again.
If you don't know, now you know, nigga.
Your death was the game warning you. As there's no in-game penalty for death, you just have to start over, and now you know it's there, you can avoid it. In a scenario like that, I don't think I would call it unfair. Unfair implies that you have no reasonable means of recourse, that you're forced to rely on luck to overcome it, that you were punished for no reason. In this scenario, the reason is to teach you to avoid the pit. I have to evoke the meta of video games to make this claim, but ultimately, the pit isn't unfair. This boss isn't unfair. For a rhythm game, do you know what it is? Disrespectful. It is mean. It is very, very mean. It is the cheapest shot that can be thrown at you while still barely, technically qualifying as fair. It serves no purpose but to frustrate you, yet you can still overcome it. I mean, if you want to talk unfair, this could be so much worse. How do randomly generated rhythms sound? How about random camera angles, random skips to different time signatures? Imagine you couldn't learn the boss. You just had to hop in each time and hope for the best. For all the disrespect this boss throws, it does remain consistent. That's why my progression has still remained linear throughout. Once you know what to look out for, you can master it. After I got through each tricky segment, I never died there again. Each of the earlier phases just became a formality I needed to suffer through each time I attempted to progress. That's what this boss is, right? The only thing that really irks me about this trick is the fact that it doesn't feel intentional. It feels like an error in sound design, but you know what? Man, making your way back through these earlier phases does hit different now that you know there's more to the fight. I was so much more nervous. I didn't mess up, but I was so much more frightened that I would. Your heart is given a whole 6 minutes to start pumping harder and harder until you're back where you were. I died a lot during this phase. 6 or 7 times maybe, around 40 minutes of game time. Thanks to nerves and maybe just sheer length, this is the one part of the fight where I started floundering a bit and dying where I don't think I normally would. My emotions were getting to me at this point. I was the only variable standing in my way. But I'd eventually get back to where I was. So, zoom into her, easy. Zoom into me, ha, I got them, you dumb bitch! And what comes next? Ah yes, flailing about wildly. And the rhythms do not go easy on you. I'd say this is the single hardest rhythm to respond to, but it's followed by a measure of 8th notes which can be seen as a blessing for keeping you in tempo. Still died to it from a misclick though. Oh well. But you might think, what comes after this? This was the last trick that was introduced, right? And sure enough, once you finally get through this part, the screen starts fading to black. You're at the end. But that wasn't the last trick that was introduced. Technically, the last trick that was introduced was the notion that the tempo could drop as well as rise, and that idea is developed here. The song starts slowing down as it reaches the end. You have to respond to the beats it sends while accounting for the deacceleration. The rhythms are basic as can be, but that can make it sting even more to lose here. This is also incredibly mean. You have performed perfectly for 6.5 minutes and the end is finally in sight. You are so antsy to get this finished and the boss is asking you to wait, to take it slow. Deep breaths. Your heart is beating through your eyeballs at this point, but you have to keep your cool. And you do. From denial, to anger, to bargaining, to depression, I think you finally reach acceptance. Even as the screen goes completely black, and it sends out one more cheeky note, you're ready. You've got it. And the notes stop coming. The outro plays. And the song finally comes to an end. Oh yes, the screen is pitch black. The song is finished. There is no indication for when you could possibly hit this final fuck you.
Hey, Zero?
And then the cutscene starts. You have to hit this final note at some random point in the cutscene. Let's have a peek at what that looks like, shall we?
Hey, Zero?
Yeah?
I had a lot of fun.
I would have cried, but I was laughing too hard. This is when the fight starts. Remember, I said this fight was binary. It doesn't matter that you did all of that perfectly unless you hit this final note. And I'm not kidding when I say there is at first no indication as to when you're supposed to hit the button. It is impossible to respond properly. The only way you could know when in the cutscene you're supposed to press the button is to die there. This is a pit. And of course it is. This is an art piece, fully aware of how mean it's being, so of course it ends. It has to end with the cheapest shot it could possibly take. Fuck you. This is what the fight was always building to. The notion that you couldn't trust your eyes and that you had to rely on rhythm was just so you could feel the pain of having that assurance violated. The fact that elements like the camera tricks and tempo changes were introduced before being developed was to build a sense that this boss was following some conventional structure of progression, only so you could be more effectively blindsided by this. And if you didn't clock when exactly in the cutscene you died, which, you didn't because you were blindsided, you're gonna have to do it again. You're going to have to go through the entire fight again, knowing you're going to die at the end, so you can hopefully learn to do it right next time. The fight doesn't matter. It is a 7-minute formality to earn you an opportunity to learn when to hit this final beat. I'll be honest, as soon as I realized that this is what the boss was asking of me, I just cheated. I understood what the boss was doing, I appreciated the artistry, I had a good laugh.
Fuck off! Ah, Cord, I want it to be done. And it's so long. It is funny. It just... it's so sad and demoralized. It's fine. Why did they do this? Why did anybody do this? Pray for me, man.
I'm not doing that. I'm absolutely a masochist, but I'm not stupid. I looked up a video to see when in the cutscene I was supposed to press the button. I just expedited the learning process. I still had to do the damn thing. I earned this victory.
Oh, I did it, Cord. I did it. I am based. I'm so based, Cord. I did it.
And finally, for realsies this time, the screen fades to black. The song comes to an end. The boss sends out its final fuck you. You press that button, and...
I had a lot of fun.
Boy did I! You cheeky queef! Go away! I don't want to play with you anymore! I'm going to vomit! So that is the final song. Ultimately, it is a fight against the director more than anything else. It is a meta joke being told at your expense. You can see how funny it is, but you really can't laugh at it in earnest until you beat it. There is no pretense. Your enemy is the fourth wall. Your enemy is your general understanding of how games work. The final boss will test the skills I picked up throughout the game, right? No, it's Guitar Hero. The screen exists to display useful information, right? No, it is there to murder you. A cutscene is not gameplay, right? No! In fact, the epic conclusion to your input in this game will be an awkward fart in the background of a conversation. Typically, bosses test your skill. The difficulty lies in how strictly they test you. This is the equivalent of taking a Latin exam in math class while the teacher is trying to light your hair on fire. There is no point to this besides the hilarity of the scenario. You could shave your head before the exam, but now the teacher is just laughing at how stupid you look. It's a game, and the enemy is your own mind reacting to you playing it, having you stew through indignant thoughts as you absently tap through the first phase for the 15th time. This was never about rhythm. Still, for a rhythm game, I'll say it's not that bad. But no, this was about Yoko Taro intentionally making something otherwise simple so hilariously infuriating to learn. One hit and you're dead. No checkpoints, curveballs like clockwork, 7-minute runtime, all to lead up to the cheapest trick in the book. Fuck you, sir. I loved it. Why did I do this? Is this a deconstruction of the 3D action genre? All that these games ultimately boil down to is pressing a button at the right time, dealing with a shitty camera, and dying? Or is this a deconstruction of the medium? What are games about? Well, I think engagement in gameplay is a good answer. It's not about winning, it's about getting there, about playing. But here, your engagement is being leveraged against you. Gameplay is your punishment.
We already did it. It's done.
Yes, but we've got to do it again and again. And again and again and again. Different angles. Different angles.
7 hours.
So, the gameplay is punishment. The visuals are there to obscure. The challenge is arbitrary. The music seems to act as expected until the very end when you get that impossible last note that is off rhythm. And you cannot win without metagaming. That last note is a cheap shot that is only fair in the meta sense that this is a video game, and you can retry it. It necessitates you to break your immersion, and doubles down on that by keeping you concerned with gameplay during the cutscene. Almost everything here directly defies convention. Except for the notion that this is a boss, and you can beat it. It isn't impossible. It presents the idea of an unfair, impossible, ludicrous boss, but it doesn't actually commit to being that hostile because, well, that would be shit game design, wouldn't it? This isn't just a shart piece that defends its lack of quality by waving around the title of subversion or deconstruction. I could create a subversive deconstruction of a boss fight, and I don't even code. There's a link to a Google Doc in the description. There, that's my boss fight. Doesn't that defy convention? All the choices in the final song are intelligent and purposeful. It isn't just irreverent of convention, it is directly exploiting it. It isn't just cruel, it is clearly intended to be cruel, and it keeps its cruelty within reason. It makes concessions, the 4/4 time signature, the downbeat notes after each tempo change. Things like these make the elements of cruelty stand out for what they are. This fight is a really solid example of knowing the rules before breaking them. The devs knew what they could get away with, and it turns out you can get away with a lot of bullshit as long as you keep things consistent. And to what end? The mechanics, the music, the presentation, the dance choreography, the camera, and all the disrespectful elements, all of them have some meaning that correlates to the story. And I'll shoot some bullet points at you during the credits because there are some really thoughtful touches, but that's not what this video is about. I chose to bring you through this fight with as little establishing information as possible because I thought the experience of the fight alone spoke for itself. So I ask again, to what end were these subversive choices made? Well, it's a pretty good joke. A cruel, absurdist joke, but it made me laugh so much that I wanted to share it. I said before that it came at your expense, and while it certainly feels that way, at the end of the day, this joke is coming at the expense of the game. I'm laughing at the game. It compromised itself for the sake of this punchline. The game as a whole is arguably worse for its inclusion. Deaf people can't fucking play it. That is risky. And while this risk is not going to pay off for everyone, it is something to respect in a AA title. Sure, some of it may be down to novelty, and my god, I hope it stays that way. Please, don't copy this. And some of it may be down to the Stockholm effect. I'd like to think I'm not just rationalizing pointless suffering in this video. Make very bad decisions, everyone! You'll get some great stories out of them! But I think it was well executed. And I guess that is the final song. A bad decision, well made. A very good joke, in very poor taste. And I got a great story out of it. 2 out of 10. Wouldn't recommend. Thanks for watching. I hope you had a lot of fun. So here are the bullet points. I'll be talking as if you know the story. That's why this is in the credits. It's not canon. First, most obviously, the fact that this is a rhythm game because the intoners use their songs to fight. That's neat, even though the format still comes out of nowhere. Second is the fact that you play for the first time as Mikhail alone here. Mikhail, who has persevered through this story while receiving nothing but neglect, abuse, and disrespect from you. And of course, that is what you're going to receive in this fight. From Zero, no less. Yes, this is Zero. I'm pretty sure that's why this boss is such a bitch. But Mikhail always stayed upbeat and optimistic. He always powered through, and that's how you're gonna get through this. So, of course you play as Mikhail here. He's the only one who could get through this. Third is the way the visuals of this boss are your enemy. You are fighting the flower. You are fighting the intoners. Beautiful, yet terrible things. It's a clever touch that the fight presents you something you are worse off for looking at. It's hard to look away, but that beauty will be your downfall, as it was for many of the intoners' followers. That's a pretty good touch, I gotta say. Fourth is the dance choreography. Each sister's dance actually I'm not gonna lie, I have no fucking clue. I don't do dance, but this guy's comment on that guy's video says some stuff. He seems to think there's meaning there, and like from a glance that checks out, so you know. These may or may not be meaningful touches. Fifth is the camera tricks. Each sister has a unique camera trick in their phase, and even these reflect their character in some way. 5 pans out and looks to the ground, as she is concerned with the totality of earthly pleasures. 4 takes away your depth perception, because her perception of the world is similarly narrow and lacking. 3 zooms into herself, reflecting how she turned those around her into puppets. She imposed her will over theirs. While 2 zooms into you, because she invested herself so fully in others. 1 zooms everywhere until she lands on the sky. I don't really get 1. I think she was into philosophy or theology or something. She was looking everywhere for answers, as this commenter put it, so maybe that checks out. 0 uses all of these tricks, because all of these sisters are ultimately aspects of her. You could also argue that her unique trick was the fade to black, which reflects her and the flower's goal of ending it all in their own way. 6th is the fact that the boss relies on meta elements to challenge you, that every element of this fight is somehow leveraged against you to make you miserable. Well, I think that's just what it feels like to be a character in a Yoko Taro game. I think this is a moment of self-awareness about the absurd bleakness of this series. You get to see in no uncertain terms that the being who constructed this world, this story, and these characters is a dick. And it's a pretty fitting note to end on.